we are very pleased to welcome to ICRIER Dr. Shareen Joshi from Georgetown University. Shareen is an associate professor at the Edmund Walsh School of Foreign Service. She has a PhD from Yale University, and she's previously held appointments at the University of Chicago and the LSE. Shareen is trained as a development microeconomist, but today she stands as an exemplar of the interdisciplinary research that kind of recognizes that economic motives subsist within a broader framework of sort of social and cultural rubrics. As she herself has said, the core idea that permeates through much of her work is that markets are shaped by context. So economic decisions such as investments in health, education, migration, environmental safety are profoundly influenced by complex webs of cultural, social, and political forces. So she's done cutting-edge work on unpacking those complex relationships using both quantitative and qualitative methods. The paper that she will present today is an excellent example. So I don't want to give away the plot and the punchline before the presentation has even started, but the nature of the work, I think, speaks for itself. So it involves a painstaking gathering of 40 years of judicial court orders, and then, the deployment of several econometric tools to try to analyze the implications of those court orders on environmental outcomes and other social outcomes in India. So, it gives a good flavor of the type of cross-cutting approach that Shareen is justly renowned for. So I'm very much looking forward to the talk and to the discussion by Dr. Amrita Goldar. So as ICRIER's team lead on climate, Amrita needs no introduction to this audience, but we're very glad that we were able to put this event together. And with that, over to you, Shareen.
Thank you so much, Shekhar. And with a welcome like that, I'm going to not leave. So thank you. And thank you to all of you for coming. Afternoon seminars are never easy, feel sleepy. So I'll try to make this interesting all right, so I'll jump right in because I don't want to go past my allotted time. This paper, it's been in the works for years. It's actually part of a broader research agenda that I've been working on environmental litigation and environmental outcomes. Every time we present it, some great comments come in and we add things and we change things. It's currently an R&R at the Journal of Economic, JEEM, whatever that stands for. I'm like, Economics and Environmental Management, right? So all your comments would be really helpful. But beyond that, it is also, so the paper is becoming longer and longer. And after the next round of R&R, it'll be 20 pages more longer. But what I'm also doing is working on air pollution. The paper I'm going to present today is water. I'm also working on air. I know exactly how important it is because I'm here in Delhi. And we are currently dealing with the fact that, for the paper today, I'm basing it off of about 1,000 court cases. For air pollution, it's about 13,000 cases, and we can't read them all. Right? I've tried, but you can't sit and read 13,000 papers. And if you delegate it to people, even they can't, and you can't keep control of quality. So we're actually using AI. So, in our Q&A at the end, happy to talk more about that, but using AI to code up complex administrative data in India is, I think, a really promising direction of research because, micro data, I am a microeconomist. I feel like micro data is the comfort zone in which I was trained, but this is very much the world I'm now stepping into. It's coding administrative data and then matching it with micro data. And I'll show you. So there's various ways that you could look at this work. I'll start with something that needs no introduction. And so I'll move past this only because you're living it, right? India faces some of the highest pollution levels globally. I think we all know Delhi, we're living it, right? This is just not easy. And I think something we also know, and maybe I should stop quoting Greenstone Hannah because there's other work, I don't think you even need an academic citation. If laws worked, we'd be breathing better air today, right? I think we can all agree on that, that the regulatory enforcement system of India has had limited success. I wouldn't call it like it solved the problem. I think you also know this. I was watching TV last night, and the Supreme Court has already asked, please tell us which pollutants are causing health problems in Delhi, though the legislature's questioning whether there's a relationship between health and pollution. But courts are increasingly stepping in as environmental activists, right? And Shivani Ghosh has a book on this, but there's lots of research on the Indian judiciary, the landmark cases of Mr. M.C. Mehta establishing environmental jurisprudence in India, many Supreme Court interventions on air pollution, industrial waste, and then the creation of the National Green Tribunal, right? So there's been remarkably little economic analysis of the impact of these initiatives. Really, when I first started doing this, I thought I shouldn't do it because it must have been done. And it's actually very difficult to do, right? So you'll kind of, and so naively, I kind of wonder, should I ever have done this? Because it's turning out to be like the rest, a huge part of my career. But the question we're trying to ask is, can judicial interventions work, right? And because we know that the legislative system has not, can they compensate for, can they overcome the weakness of environmental regulation and enforcement, right? That's the basic question we're trying to ask. Okay, so just a quick overview of the paper, since I will definitely run out of time. I want to stop talking at what did we say, like 3:05? Is that right? No, 4:05, sorry. All right, so I'm going to try and end. So in case I run out of time, we start with the big water pollution. Today's paper will be water pollution, right? I have an analog on air, but I can't fit it into half an hour. So we take the landmark Water Pollution Act of 1974, and we go through our whole corpus of court cases, which, by the way, is something like 18 million, right? If you take the entire corpus of judicial rulings, the history of the courts of India, it's something like 80 million, which is ridiculous. Who can ever use that, right? And maybe someday there'll be a supercomputer and we can have access to it in Finland. But what I'm trying to do with it is I pick an act that I'm interested in. And then you can run some sort of sweep by saying, look, post-independence or post-1974, how many court orders have cited that act? And citations may not be great, right? It's not like there was a wonderful citation system in the 70s. But the good thing about studying pollution is most effort, Indian environmental jurisprudence, and Shivani Ghosh's book is fantastic for that, only really took off around the 90s. Really, it's a post-90s game, right? So by then, record keeping was pretty good. So we found a lot of junk when we restricted to the Water Act, things like people being promoted in the water department or, personnel decisions. There was a lot of mistagging. But once we cleaned it up, we found 978 clean court orders that directly gave instructions. They were policies passed to reduce water pollution, or they were related to water pollution. They weren't always saying reduce, right? Sometimes they were going the other way. So then we took the CPCB's data, 2,865 pollution monitors are there. We know some basic metrics of BOD, COD, etc. Then we take financial data and look, this is not great. We did it because reviewers wanted it, like saying, where's the economics in your paper? What does it mean for the economy? I don't think prowess is the best data there is, right? But it's what we had. And we've got another whole thing with the ASI. We're using that also. And then we also have health outcomes from 678 districts, right? So you can see why this took so long. What are we doing that's innovative? Well, we take our 978 cases and we try for each case, we look at who is the judge who heard that case, right? So it could be like if Shekhar was a judge, right? And Shekhar is hearing a case related to the environment. I go back into the database and say, tell me all of Shekhar Aiyar's cases. Everything he ruled on prior to hearing this case. And I use AI, we use AI for this. We form a prediction of how green is he likely to be, right? And by the way, I should go back and acknowledge my co-authors, right? They are brilliant people. Sandeep is our AI guy. He has a math PhD. Daniel Chen has done lots of work on the judiciary. Peter was a graduate student in France, and Shashank was an undergrad at IIT. He's now a PhD student at Berkeley. I was to Shekhar's introduction, I was Miss Context and micro data, right? That was my task on here. And now, some World Bank people have joined our project, and a few other people have joined. So, all right. So we're trying to predict for every judge, how likely are they to be green? And you guys are all economists. I assume random assignment. I know there's no random assignment in the courts of India, but first assignment we think is random. After that, the courts are like stall kar do, change kar do, transfer ke baad, etc. But the first assignment we think is random, right? And I can talk more about that later. So we use, judge assignment is our random, is our exogeneity. The judge's previous writing style is the instrument that we use, and then we try to predict pro-environment decisions, right? So in a nutshell, that's the paper. Now, maybe some of you are interested in this. We can come back to this in the Q&A. The database itself is super interesting, right? And this is 978 court cases. My air pollution one is even more interesting because it's 12,000 cases. Here's the funny thing, right? I thought, like being from India, that the courts are kind of green, that environment is like very progressive, judiciary. Actually, not true. A lot of orders are just stays, or actually the demand for more data or more, so pausing economic activity while they're doing things, or not allowing a scale up of economic activity, but they're not exactly reducing pollution, right? So anyway, so the average order is not that green. By the way, how did we do this? This is all human coded. In the pandemic, we had law students reading all the cases 3 times each and coming up with a score, and what you're seeing is the average. Now we're using AI, but then we weren't. About a quarter of them are constitutional cases. This is also really interesting because in public interest litigation, right to life, right, is a big feature of jurisprudence. An awful number of cases are government. In India, this really shocks me. In environmental cases, it is almost always the case that it's government versus firm. It's never citizen versus citizen. So if one of you are playing loud music late at night and I live next to you, I typically don't file a case against you. I bother you, but I don't file a case against you. But I'll go to the government and the government will file a case against you. So the state, India's government looms large over almost all environmental cases, right? So, which is, interesting in its own right. Now, many people don't love this, but it's the only way we can move forward. We think of every order as an event, right? And we drop that event in a district year bin. So what we do is for every case, or every case can produce multiple orders. You know that, right? Like the fireworks case produced like 26 orders. So in about 16% of India, there's a case present. 16% of districts of India, there's a case present. But sometimes the court rules not just for that district, but other districts around it or in the full jurisdiction. So the number of green orders per district year is about 24%. 24% of districts of India are experiencing a policy coming from the courts that is green, right? So we can talk more. This is all averaged at the district year, and you have to take into account there's a lot of district year zeros, right? So there's an underpowering problem in our paper because of the sheer number of zeros. All right. Pollution indicators, we use BOD. I'll move through this quickly. This is very standard in environmental research, BOD, COD, fecal coliforms, and we have some other measures, conductivity and temperature. The levels are reasonably high. We use max readings, not average readings. Why? Because we're interested in volatility and fluctuation. How bad does it get, right? That's what we're focusing on. Now, we are underpowered. We've got an attrition problem. We don't cover all of India. Why? Because you don't get surface water monitors all over India, and you don't get green rulings all over India. So this is our map, right? This is where our paper gets rejected at places like the QJE or whatever, because it's not covering the whole country. We can only speak of the overlap between the BOD and the water pollution. But the good news is we're not all Delhi, all Bangalore, and all Ahmedabad, right? Like we have we have distribution of sites all over India. So, okay. Some people are really interested in what our data look like, varieties of orders. So this is what I meant. There was very little environmental litigation in India. Everything really starts in the 1990s. The total number of cases starts climbing really after about 2004. Most cases involve the government. That's the blue line. Appeal cases are in the dotted red. Sorry, I don't think the pointer will work on the screen. Appeal cases are that brown line, and then public interest litigation is really the big category, right? And you guys all know this. So almost all the cases feature either the text mentions firms directly, or they talk about permits, right? Like permits, environmental clearances, and typically the case is they've started operating, they're polluting the river, and they don't have a permit, right? And the court will say, stop and go and get your permit or something like that. So firms, permits, almost all the cases, don't mention toxicity, but a large number of them do. This is and quite a lot of cases pertain to the Ganga, but not as many as I thought. I thought this was all going to be a Ganga River basin issue, but it actually wasn't. And, I looked for some interesting themes about global environmental jurisprudence. Indian judges seem to be very avid readers of, UN declarations, the Rio Declaration. They read widely. And they cite international law, they cite American law a lot, the Water Act, Air Act. They talk about things quite a lot. And by the way, these orders are really interesting to read, because one thing is Indian judges have quite a bit of agency. Like if I'm a judge and you're a judge, we can be quite different writing about the same thing. They have quite a bit of they don't keep it short. I've read cases that were like 900 pages, right? So I didn't read all of it.
Ask clarifying questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so
definitely.
Quick question. So the way you're describing it, the sort of representative case seems to be that there's some firm which is polluting.
Yeah.
And the case is about asking the firm to stop polluting. But I thought from a previous graph that the government was the respondent in 80% of the cases.
They're appeals. So when it's an appeal, it's flipped.
I see. So when a firm is appealing, then the government's the respondent.
Yeah. So most of our cases are actually appeals. I don't know why that is. Actually, I'd love, insight. Nobody's been able to tell me why most of I think it's because I'm getting them all from the high courts. And the high court and the Supreme Court are appellate courts.
Also, perhaps because the PILs are typically against the government.
Against the government, exactly. So I think it intuitively, it's the way you said, but in practice, it'll be flipped. Yeah. So, all right. By the way, stop me, please, for more clarifying questions. All right. So, I'm not going to give you too many equations, but I feel like that's a different kind of seminar where, I need a good hour and 15 minutes to go into the econometrics. But just so we're clear, right? The economics, the fundamental equation we're estimating is Y is either pollution, mortality, or firm level outcomes. It's some sort of outcome. On the right-hand side are the fraction of water pollution orders that we deemed pro-environment, green orders, right? Condition on there being water pollution orders in that district. And then we have a bunch of controls. We've got night lights. We've got, we use air pollution as a control for water pollution sometimes. We've got urbanization. We linked to shrug, and we got lots of controls for population density and so on, right? We've got probably more than we need to. The fraction of green verdicts are basically like the number of green orders divided by the total number of orders in that district. It's nothing profound. The central endogeneity problem we have, obviously, is that pollution and green orders are not two random things, right? Green orders may be endogenous to pollution. In Delhi, right now, the air is bad. There's going to be a lot of court action against it. When pollution becomes bad, people file more court cases, right? So this is what I was talking about earlier. We've got to find a solution to that, right? So we use the judge's writing style from non-environmental cases to predict environmental outcomes. Look, all IVs are, constructed on flimsy assumptions. I'm not even going to try to hide that, right? Relevance. We're assuming that this is relevant, that their previous writing style does have a connection to their current writing style. I guess I would call that ideology, or who they are as people, right? What their worldview is. Exclusion is a big one, that the writing style affects pollution only through court decisions, right? For judges, that they're not choosing their transfers based on the desire to litigate on these issues. And then judges are randomly assigned to cases. Now, that is a problematic assumption, but the more I study it, there was a book last year basically saying, look, first assignment is random. After that, the political, the business as usual of the court, stall, don't show up, wait for a judge to be transferred. There's a whole bunch of techniques we all use in the courts of India when we don't like a particular judge, right? So, but we're using first assignment. So, in the paper, we've got table after table of F stats. They're not great, right? Our F stats are above 10, but barely above 10. In some cases, we don't even make 10. We use weak instrument tests.
Sorry, one more question. I'm not sure I understand how writing style predicts environmental ideology. So you could be like Hemingway and use very short sentences, or you could be like Salman Rushdie and use very long ones. How does that predict how green they are?
Yeah, so the way it works is, so I don't have a great answer for you. What we do is we use this algorithm called Dr. Vec. What Dr. Vec does is it takes any document, right? It can take the full corpus of any one of us, all of us have written in our lives, right? It'll take the full corpus of everything you give it, and it'll give you a 25-dimensional vector that captures the style in which that. So short sentences is one dimension. Use of technical words is another dimension, right? Another one is kind of, and in the paper, what I try to show you, so this is, you can't show you 25 dimensions, right? So here we've used a technique to kind of take a 25-dimensional vector and show 2 dimensions. And in the paper, what we do is, like, you see the dark, there are dark blue dots on one part of it. So on the left is orders and on the right is judges, right? And what are we doing? We take the dark blue cases and we start reading them, and then we compare them to like the gray cases on the left. And what you see is the judges vary, not in simple ways like length of sentences or how refined their English is, but the jurisprudence itself. Now, how is the algorithm sorting them out around 25 dimensions? I can't tell you because it's beyond my comprehension too. But what we did notice is that all our green orders, right? The dark blue are our green orders. They tend to cluster together. And when we read those cases, those corresponded to, like in the previous thing, right? Like the cases where there was, over here, where you get like constitution is mentioned a lot. Or another one, another judge in our sample, right? Is he really, and they're all he's. I think we have 2 women. It's really unfortunate. We have a couple of judges who clearly went and studied in the US, and they really cite international, like the polluter pays principle, right? So they've taken and you can kind of see it clustering. So I can't see it on this chart, but you can definitely see it in some of the charts in the paper where we show the right to life folks are camping out in the bottom right quadrant. The sustainable development people are in the same quadrant. And when you read these cases, you can kind of see, all right, the Dr. Vec algorithm has worked out. There are similar patterns in their jurisprudence. And one thing we're going to try and do is make this a little more explicit. But for us, we don't even need to know what different, because the point is we should just predict, do they rule green? So we've also tried a system where we say, just look at the keywords in our orders, does this judge invoke the Constitution a lot in their previous rulings, right? Then they'll be more likely to cite right to life. And once you do right to life, you're a green judge, right? So that we've done it in other ways. The other thing we try to do is we try to look at their background, where they've studied. And one hypothesis that I find really interesting is judges who studied in poorer states, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, etc., they're much more pro-development. So because of the transfer system, we kind of know, we looked from the judge handbooks what their background was. So if you come from there, you're more pro-development. If you come from Mumbai, if you come from a kind of much more liberal state, you're more pro-environment. So we can use that too. Then we can look at, did they just do an LLM? Did they get additional education? The more educated the judge, the more they rule for the environment. So we tried to use gender, thinking maybe women would be more sympathetic to the environment, but we have only 2 female judges. I've tried other things too, like looking at, personal characteristics of the judge, age, number of years to retirement. There's some potential there for age to retirement. They're more green towards the middle part of their career. Right before retirement, they become less green. So we tried it with, look, maybe Dr. Vec is too much of a, black box. And it kind of works. We're just a little underpowered with those.
But the short point is that writing style is the right terminology. Because it may be the philosophy which he is following, what you mentioned, the keywords, that shows his somewhat ideology also. But it's not writing style, it's the philosophy of that judge.
That's fair. So maybe I'm being too aligned with Dr. Vec to say, but you're right, that was our intent, is to capture their ideology.
When you're talking about the previous judgments, you looked at those judgments written only in that particular court or in their entire career as a judge?
And this took us a long time because, some names like Ajay Singh, which Ajay Singh? So you have to say, he heard a case in Delhi. Where did he come from? There are 3 or 4 Ajay Singhs. We have to really sort it out. It took a bit of I not the best chapter of, but in the pandemic, what else was there to do, right? So, all right. So this is a bottom line of what we find on pollution, right? So we divide each event into 3 phases, right? Just for the sake of convenience for this audience, in the paper, we can show you year by year 1, year 2. But for now, I think it's probably fair to say, let's just keep it as aggregated. There's pre-filing, right? I think we look at like 2 years during the litigation and then post-decision. The key idea here is pre-filing, we really don't see any impact of green. These are second stage, right? So from the instrumental variables, these are our final estimates. This is the endogeneity is cleaned out, basically. Pre-filing, no impact of, pollution is basically at the 0 line, right? Like there's nothing about that case, about that location that's more or less polluted. During the period of litigation, right, the district seems to record less max values of pollution. So look, if this is Delhi, Yamuna, I'm not saying the Yamuna is less polluted on average. I'm saying the Yamuna's worst days are less bad. right? When there was a case on the Yamuna, maybe you would not see those towers of toxic foam, right? You'd see shorter towers of toxic foam. That's all I'm saying is the max readings reduce during litigation. The problem is after litigation, after the court passes its green order, unfortunately, pollution goes back up again. And I think we who live in India kind of know this to be true. The best days for the environment are when the court is actually watching. Scrutiny, environmental litigation as scrutiny, like dogs, right? Like when the court was deliberating on dogs, all the dog lovers, right, were being extra nice to the dogs. The fear I have, I'm a big dog lover, right? And so the fear I have is all those dog lovers, the moment the court passes a ruling, even if it's in their favor, will care a little less. Because why? It's not salient. Most people, the government can't enforce things, I think, is the issue. Right? Then we look at infant mortality.
Sorry, can you just go back? The post decision, we are focused on successful green cases, right?
Yes.
So this is post a favorable green decision. It's not just because of course you would expect some reversion if many of the cases were lost. But this is favorable.
Successful cases. And I have another paper, guys. In 2018, I published a paper on the Ganga, showing the closure of the tanneries, right? The very famous MC Mehta case, where it was amazing, right? The Supreme Court, that was the first public interest litigation. They passed this ruling, pollution goes down, mortality goes down. But the problem is 5 years later, people were polluting more because whatever was built became this beautiful screen behind which you can pollute as much as you want. It had the optics of problem solved. There was no shared a system of shared responsibility was not created by the court, right?
But there should be some sort of accounting for the litigation time. In some cases are 2 months, some cases are 15 years.
Yeah, so that's why.
So how much pollution goes down in 15 years?
So that's why we do that, right? That's why it's a little complicated in terms of it, but every event we divide into 3 phases. If the during phase is long, then we let it be long. Every event, every one of those 978 cases in it is an event. And we divide it into 2 years pre, during however many years, and then 2 years to 5 years after. And we do robustness checking for that.
And at times you'll have multiple cases for the same district.
We do.
So then this duration is on each case basis?
Yes, each case basis.
And one more question on the previous slide, if we could just go back. So, as you mentioned, during litigation could be several years. So this minus 0.5, is that per year or is that the cumulative decrease over the entire period of litigation?
It is per year that litigation
but
is.
then just for the sake of example, if during litigation phase is an average of 10 years and the post-decision phase is an average of 2 years, then
That's
if you
fair.
add that up, this could still represent a fall in pollution.
That's true. That is true. But then the post phase is kind of like, everything is post phase, right?
So right up to 2024.
Exactly. So the post is always going to be bigger than the during, right? So where in some sense, you're right, but typically we can vary the post length, but if anything, it'll become more, not less. We're being conservative on that front. Mortality, we really find nothing. Everything is within the 0 line. So this is actually good news. I think Indians know that water is polluted. Even you go into poorer districts, poorer areas, people are aware. So even if pollution is going up, pollution is going down, you don't see. Now, we also might be underpowered, right? Like mortality is a rare event in India. Anyway, you add up districts, all the NFHS is not great. Sometimes we have 0 deaths a sample, which doesn't make sense. But for what it's worth, we don't pick up anything on mortality. The firms one is interesting, right? Because what you find is pre-filing, this is prowess data. We have income, assets, expenses, and liabilities. We even have some data on pollution mitigation directly, but we're not sure what that's actually telling us. So it's in the paper, but I didn't bring it here. The firms that have cases are not that different than the firms that don't have cases pre-filing. during litigation, same thing. And then post litigation, it looks like the same thing. But when you zoom in, you can see a little more effects, right? At the filing stage, it looks like if you just do, this is lags 4-1, and then there's, leads 4-1, and then lags 1-5. You can start to see at the filing stage, not much effect, but at the decision stage, you can start to see. So during the period of litigation, firms seem to be spending more, or they're polluting less, and that's hurting their bottom lines. Post decision, all their financials improve, right? So they deal with the pollution issue as they see fit, probably, and then their assets and income goes up. So, all right, I'll just kind of let it go to Q&A. What time is it, by the way? I should have brought a watch. All right, I should wrap up. So look, good news is there is some effect in the decision year, right? And in the paper, we show it in the year itself. The reality is pollution is rebounding pretty fast. And Shekhar, if you expand the number of years, as many after as during, it becomes even worse. Mortality seems to go up post-decision, though again, it's within the, so it seems like what's happening is a case is filed, there's scrutiny, firms reduce pollution, then there's a court decision, attention fades, and pollution comes back. Right? So I think you guys know this. We live in India. There's other papers that have said this, including mine. And there's lots of kind of qualitative work. I think we know why long-term impact doesn't work. I won't read this slide. I think India's institutional complexity, technological limitations, a lot of pollution in India is dealt with through common effluent treatment plants. A lot of them are World Bank funded. They're not the best solution for pollution, because it's an end of pipe technology. It doesn't change behavior. And there's no kind of shared responsibility for pollution. You can't fix pollution through an end of pipe technology that's just going to clean, supposedly, because the technology is going to break and no one's going to fix it, right? That's what typically happens. So what we want to conclude is judicial activism is nice, but it's not going to fix anything long term. Sustained improvement is going to take work, institutional capacity building. And look, there's lots of things that can happen within the status quo. This is not a India needs to change its institutions. I think we need more post-judgment monitoring. I think theory is downstairs, right? They're working on this, certainly. Improving regulatory capacity. CETPs, the World Bank may like them, but we've got to go beyond them. We've got to really get into green initiatives, community ownership of environmental problems. And what we're doing, I think I already said this, we're very much going, I think this was a small sample of just water toxicity, but really air. And we're trying to also, to your point about argument mining, look at what legal strategies work best, right? Which judges are amenable to them. There's kind of interesting questions over there. So I'll stop
Amrita?
Yes, so now the unenviable job of discussing this paper further lies me. I usually hate it when people discuss my work because it generally starts with, this is all fine, but
You're welcome to do that.
you should simply appreciate a beautiful piece of work, and I am deeply appreciative of the work. And once reading the paper, one can actually imagine the amount of hard work that has gone in. Now, not many people in the room would know. I think nobody would know. My PhD was actually on impacts of BITs on FDI.
Oh,
I had to sit down and go through all of those agreements, doing what your law students had done, looking at the agreements, then categorizing them based on how stringent they were, what sort of burden they put on developing countries, etc., etc. So I know the amount of hard work that goes in. That being said, some things or some, I think, comments can be made. And sorry,
I didn't get my notes back. Yeah, no, carry on. I'm listening. Carry on, keep talking.
Okay, so Shareen, I think most of this, some of the points that I had noted down while reading the paper, you have already mentioned as way forwards or takeaways. I think the last two slides. So basically, how you have signaling effects, basically from court rulings. So if districts are in sort of prolonged state of agitation, you have one case after the other. You imagine that enforcement would improve, and the fact that we have some colleagues in my team who were erstwhile DPCC employees, which is the Delhi Pollution Control Board. So I was asking them about what is the linkage between courts and the action of Pollution Control Board. So they are working in the upstream in terms of initiating cases, also in the midstream in terms of deciding the environmental compensation once it's been proven. But after that, in terms of compliance plans, it sort of goes sorry, like you don't know what's happening. So I think even the paper sort of mentions this. My comments will be mostly broadly econometric in nature.
Yeah.
So I think let me restrict myself because that is, I think, I know better than law. So first is that you are talking about the role of SPCBs, and the modeling as it is done has a lot of variables that are at the district level. I was just wondering if we can have certain proxies, and again, I'm assuming this paper is already done.
No, there's space.
There's space. Okay, great. So if we can have proxies for state level regulatory capacity proxies.
Yeah, that's interesting because we've got state fixed effects, or we've got district fixed effects.
Yeah.
Or sorry, state fixed effects for sure.
So,
But we can run versions where we learn something about
because
those.
I think in the paper were mentioning something about web scraping, a lot of things. So maybe for vacancy announcements or any level of understaffing, if you have information,
That's a
that could
good
be
idea.
one proxy that could be put in. The second one was more about this is on a case to case basis, but even from a cumulative sense. So let me tell you where this is coming from. Now, for many people who sort of work in the field of environment would know that water monitoring stations are not randomly distributed. Either you place them at things where it's very clean, or you put them where.
I know. You're right. You're right.
So in that way, you might not mean this case, but the number of cases on a cumulative basis, or the number of, so you have this sort of, I think, cumulative intensity of green orders also. I think the -2 to +2.
Yeah.
So even that cumulative for a district, would that make sense?
No, you're right. This is an issue. And it's an issue with all water pollution research in India. No, it's true. What you're saying, there's a whole political economy of the placement of monitors. I don't know how to deal with that.
If I could sort of come into this debate, so I was also a little bit puzzled, although I didn't say anything, that you're using as your measure the maximum, the worst day of the year.
Yeah.
Aren't you throwing away lots of information?
Yeah,
Because there are 365 days in the year. Doesn't the average give you a better indicator, especially if some of the monitors are in clean places and some of them are in dirty places?
So we do it with the mean also. We do it with the median also. We use lots of them in the appendix and we show robustness. But the reason we like the max is we think that's where all the publicity is. See, when the AQI touches 1,000, everybody goes. But when it's like 500 to 520, no one. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
which would be catastrophic in most parts.
And it'd be catastrophic in most parts. So we think that the pollution levels of India are such that the max values are what make people very concerned because those are what the media reports. But you're right. And in the paper, we've got the mean and the median, and the results mostly go through. I think if you've read it more recently than me.
Okay. The fourth point was, I think, some points of appreciation. I think this point about your contemporaneous links, or sorry, current links versus having it done dynamic was, I think, very nifty and I think very smart, because you can see both links. So at a point in time, what is happening, and over time, what is happening, because they give a different flavor of what the impact is going to be. But I noticed that in the paper, there are certain impacts that you're probably hinting at, but not really drawing out. So for example, if you're talking about impact on firms, it could be that the reduction is happening because they are moving away. I think that was one of the lines there in the paper. Now, you are not controlling for that, or like my
Because
thing.
it's district level, no? That's the problem.
Yeah. So would having rather than having it as discrete analysis pieces, can all these pieces be put together into a simultaneous equation systems so that you have better efficiency?
That's a good idea.
So that is another one.
No,
Then-
that's a good idea. I haven't even thought of that one yet.
Okay. The other point was, I think, with respect to, so this comes, like, this is pretty hard hitting. The fact that firms may choose to relocate rather than abate. And
Yeah.
but my question is, because you're looking at it from the dynamic sense also, where are they going?
So this is an issue with prowess. I mean, I actually think we don't do this great. We do it enough to appease some referee who doesn't know India. The problem with prowess is it covers large firms. Large firms report in prowess based on their headquarters. Now, there are subsidiaries. So actually, that's not true. So like Taj Hotels, Delhi has to be registered separately for tax reasons than Taj Hotels Mumbai, and Taj Hotels Jaipur has to register. So I think we're okay, but there might be firms in our sample which move, but we don't, they're moving within state and we don't pick it up, right? Because we pick up prowess based on where they're registered. The firm financials are linked to the company that registers in the database.
So
It's an issue. It's an
yeah.
issue.
So this hit me really hard. So the paper is beautiful, don't get me wrong. But as an economist, I think this is a very stark piece of information or stark analysis piece that sort of comes across, because you have the three pillars of sustainable development, but you are essentially proving that environment and economy are sort of at loggerheads. Because if you have one, you can't probably have the other. Because I think that is what you were also talking about when you talk about backgrounds of judges, because somebody might, because of the background, lay greater emphasis on development while the
Yeah.
other might. So this, I wonder if this can be a piece that, I think you said your paper is already too big, but rather than mentioning it in passing, but the fact that from an ideology sense or from a policy
Yeah.
sense, can you have both? Because there is a lot of debate that says you can have both, but probably not. So anyways, sorry, this is that. Okay, two more points. First is this point that you talked about, this anticipation effect. And I think Sanjana ma'am also talked about it in your paper. You mentioned that average length of case is around 8 years. I hope I'm getting that
So
right.
most of them resolve within 2 to 3. Actually, that's really surprising because we all believe that the courts of India have these endless. We didn't observe anything that was more than 8 years. Actually.
So 8 is the maximum period.
8
not
is a
that-
maximum.
Yeah, 8 is our max.
So does, again, to her point, do length matter? Like, you're just waiting for the scrutiny to be over and people forget and they just go back to their ways. So maybe that scrutiny loses its edge after a point in time. So that is
True.
0.6. 0.7, and this is the biggest thing. Now I'll sort of hark back to sort of ICRIER's background as well. So I remember Ishar ma'am, she was our chairperson earlier.
Yeah.
So she has done this enormous body of work on urban infrastructure investments, etc. She was also, sorry, I'm maybe pronouncing this incorrectly, amicus curiae
Yeah.
for this case on the air pollution caused or particulate matter resulting from all of the construction work that was happening nearby. So there is a background to what I'm saying. So I'm just wondering, and you mentioned this point about CETPs also, the fact that there is a very strong linkage between urban infrastructure investments is not probably delved into more, because just court rulings would not help. somebody has to come in and solve the matters. It could be the private folks themselves, but it could also be the government who sort of becomes a sort of shepherd guiding them together. So a CETP is of substantive quantity. It can't be for probably just one firm. So if multiple firms come together under government stewardship, you can probably have something. So there is some things about investment planning by urban governments that could be talked about. I think that is it. Oh, last point is about public activism. And you also mentioned the entire thing about PLI, etc., etc. You could consider also a dummy on the number of environmental NGOs operating in a district.
It's a very good idea. Civil society capacity. And we can get that data.
Yeah. So that's all from my side. Sorry
No, that's great.
for being pesky.
I have just a small question. You have analyzed about 1,000 odd cases in your presentation you have mentioned. And your conclusion is that judicial activism is kind of, temporary, in the sense that it's only for a time period, limited time period, that you might see some improvement in parameters. But did you kind of get a feeling that the judgments or the judgments given, which you have studied, are the judges well endowed with technical knowledge, which actually comes from regulatory bodies and other technical bodies, or are they just shooting in the dark? Are they adequately equipped to pass those orders with the knowledge that is required for that particular case, from the technical side?
That's a great question. So what I saw over time was in the early stages, they were shooting in the dark and very much looking to the CPCBs and the SPCBs to give them data, right, on pollution trends. Then they started asking organizations like TERI to do impartial assessments, and they relied on kind of the studies themselves. They've had professors come in Rajasthan, Rajasthan University came in as witnesses and so on. So they tend to call expertise. But what you're saying is right. And Shibani's book really went into it, that we don't really have a training program for environmental jurisprudence. So the average judge is in a situation that's kind of impossible. They try to call in outside experts. That's why these cases take a little longer, but they do pretty well. Now, I think that was the basis of the creation of the Green Tribunal. And we've got Green Tribunal cases, and the Green Tribunal tends to rule a little more green, but not as much as you think. Even in my air pollution cases, I didn't see the Green Tribunal be like green advocacy, not like that. So I'm perplexed by this as well. I think they got better and better over the time period. Actually, it's pretty remarkable. Some of them get their expertise by reading international legal journals. Some they quote from there. A lot of them draw on Hinduism, religion, right, on rivers being goddesses. There's a huge variation in, which is what makes their writing style so variable. Yeah. That's not a great answer to your question, but that needs to be documented in itself, I think.
No, I draw my, whatever I said in terms of air, because, today we don't even know, if you take the case of Delhi, that what is causing this air pollution in terms of percentages. So what orders, what policies can you possibly pass?
No, we know, right? Gutikunda's work.
Well, it keeps changing, I think, every time. Like, at one point of time, it was stubble burning. At some point of time, it was automobiles. Then it was two-wheelers.
Construction. I think it's everything, right? Because we do know that in the pandemic, it got better. But what happened in the pandemic, all of it stopped. We kind of know it's man-made. It's not just nature. Nature sends fog to Delhi. But it's some mix of stubble burning, vehicles, burning garbage even in the city, two-wheelers, construction dust. Just 20% for everything.
It comes, we don't.
Asked on a specific point which has been brought to the judge, not as a general pollution controller. They're not. So if a case has come saying, okay, you should ban whatever, these BS4 vehicles or diesel vehicles. So they are ruling on that specific point.
Yeah.
It's not a general controlling mandate that they have, and they are enforced.
Yeah, but our empirical strategy can kind of deal with that, right? Because we're looking at all things being equal, that one policy for the best buses or whatever they did have in it. So I don't think it's, I was surprised we found anything at all, right? In fact, I have a Delhi paper on air. We find the same thing. We actually find there are bigger effects than I thought there would. But again, they're temporary. Yeah.
So one is, you may like to look at the syllabus of National Judicial Academy Bhopal in particular, and maybe some of the other state judicial academies.
Oh, great.
Do they have any program, for example, on environmental type of thing? For example, at times I've gone there on cybercrime, for example. Okay. So do they have that type of program? So that could be one in terms of capacity building. The second is, there could also be very specific suggestion in terms of one particular judge, which is Justice Kuldeep Singh, who was in the Supreme Court. He was
Yes.
elevated directly
in our
from the
council.
bench. I'm sure that he is there, but the fact that he himself was known as a green judge, so maybe a case study of that sort, maybe a short
Thank
case
you.
study
Yeah,
that might be.
absolutely.
Actually, I'm not very sure, but we spent a lot of effort, a lot of time in the beginning talking about green judge and who is likely to be a green judge, and you're analyzing their writing style. My point is, but why? Like, why so much energy? What is the motivation to know whether a judge is green or not?
Because
Whether the
that's
judgment is green or not, this should be the point.
no, but
Yeah.
not the
judgments,
judge.
But it's the ID.
it's the instrument. See, it's the judgment is green or not, but the criticism is green judgments come in the most pollution locations. It's not, it's endogenous. So I have to break that endogeneity. The judges are a critical component of the paper. And there's a big literature on, as you're saying, on green judges, but people tend to attribute it to Mr. Singh's personality or his thing. What we're saying is, as long as he got transferred the normal way and a case arrived and the way the docket systems work, his matching to that case is as good as random the first time. And the fact that he heard it will produce a green book. Yeah.
And that database,
The results are beyond the organic natural intensive industries because you have basically measured COD, BOD, and today also, but there are some other pollutants like.
I know. We don't have data. I'm using government of India data. The results will only be as good as the data. I don't think there's never going to be a paper on those because we didn't gather that data historically. Maybe now we are, but I think, I haven't said it, but another aspect of this is we just need better monitoring. More pollution monitors, clearly spaced out. We have, two other pollutants, they're missing in our data. So BOD and COD is almost always there. Sulfates, nitrates, huge numbers of districts don't report it at all.
And these cases that you have chosen, so these are all cases in which firms are defendants.
No, these are cases that cite the Water Act, and the Water Act predisposes itself.
Because when we're talking firm analysis, there's a lot of times the polluters are actually government departments, like we've seen in Indore right now.
That's PILs. So PILs take the government to court. Like, the municipality of Kanpur was accused of disposing municipal waste in the river. That's in our samples. Citizens accusing the government of negligence. That's in our samples.
Other ones are all related to.
Others are related to firms. That's the government, the CPCB or RPC, the state, but the SPCB takes a firm to court for non-compliance. That's largely the kind of case.
Have you split the sample between these cases?
No, I should do that.
Because it may be that if it's the government that's ordered to clean up its act, perhaps it's longer lasting. Or
I
not.
can check that. I think that's actually something on our list for our R&R. I think we have to do that.
she mentioned that a database biased more for industrial pollution, or does it have the urban pollution as well? The two problems are very, very different in nature and.
So that's the
Because you
BOD
mentioned
and
COD
COD are largely industrial. Fecal coliforms are largely, domestic. But we measure that also, and we don't see as much movement on those. because those don't tend to fluctuate so wildly. They're not amenable to policy in the absence of big reforms in India.
So the cases you have 963 cases. So you were mapping them with the BODs and CODs, I believe. So I just want to know, like these cases are directly linked to some of the, like there would be a monitoring station nearby to link that BOD, COD, or if there are some cases because the D2V, the model algorithm which you are using for the text recognition, so that would give you the cases. But how are you then linking it with the BOD and COD data which you have like from the government sources?
At the district level, district year level, and we have in our paper district month. And we've tried something using cities, but the district is largely district year in the version I've showed you is for today. Now, that's a good thing to think about, right? So think about like clusters of firms, like really think. And in India, small firms typically do locate in industrial clusters. That's largely what's going on here is think about the leather tanneries of Kanpur. They're a huge cluster by the Ganga River. Supreme Court of India says shut down. They all reduce their production. They'll still do it. They might move to Unnao, but the waste is going to go in the same river. So that's why even moving, we're not too worried unless you completely move districts, which is quite difficult in India, right? To purchase land outside the district and move your whole operation. Typically, they'll move away from scrutiny. In Jaipur, they moved from Sanganer to Bagru, but it's the same district. So I'll still pick it up. And that, that's the reality of it. So, but what you're saying is right, which is I'm not measuring it at the person experience, I'm doing it at the district level.
Because when you are using that log COD and log BOD for your pre-filing and during filing and post-filing. So when you are saying after post-filing, the cases like the pollution is increased, the COD and BOD content is increased. If you don't have a monitoring station near that particular case which was filed, then how are you getting to the decision that it is increasing?
No, so remember my sample, and this is a weakness of the paper, right, is the data overlap. You have to overlay all the districts that have cases and all the districts that have pollution. And I only study where those two things match.
Okay.
But these BOD, COD levels are in receiving bodies, receiving water bodies, or at the exit of the resource?
We don't know. We measure it at the district level. Now, the point is well taken that these can be strategically placed. So, but then, that is the backbone of all water research in India.
There are different standards for the industry, what they
So we've done that too.
and the receiving bodies standards are different depending on what kind of a receiving body.
So we've done a version of our results where we look at the Indian government standards, right, for drinking water, bathing, effluent, and the results go through. I'm showing you the raw, but I could be like, do you cross the threshold of the minimum? The results go through. But yes, I'm not distinguishing. I have another paper where for every monitor, I match an upstream monitor and look at a shutdown firm in the middle and try to control for upstream pollution in the downstream location. I'm not doing that here. It's impossible to do it, frankly, because you need so much panel data and the missing data problem is huge for us in that. I know what you want, right? It's a panel for every firm, upstream monitor and a downstream monitor over time and matching it. We can't get there.
The ultimate would be if you could use adjacent districts which are downstream.
We've done that.
Because then the environmental decision is truly exogenous. It's happening in the neighboring district.
We've done that in the paper. We have that robustness check and it kind of goes through. Oh, and one thing I should answer to this. You kind of asked this, but it was embedded in your question. So if Delhi passes an order and the judge says it's a Supreme Court order, that this is not just for Delhi, it's for the whole Ganga Basin or Yamuna Ganga Basin, then we catch that. And we mark that policy as being applicable in the jurisdiction, whatever the judge said. That we did. For every student who read a case, we're like, where's the origin and where does it apply? And then we capture that. So, and then obviously if it's coming from the Supreme Court, it'll apply all over India. So then we code every, it's sample, our whole sample as having had that policy. So yeah, we've made look, we've made heroic assumptions. We've tried to do them well, and we've tried to robustness check them, like the max, the average, the median. But the version of results I showed you was the one that I think intuitively, maybe the mean is better, but we think the max is better because that's largely what people track. Same thing with the monitors, right? We don't control their placement, but the good news for us is monitor locations don't change in our sample. The CPCB has been remarkably defensive and stuck its ground. It won't move monitors. So it is what it is, right? And all water pollution research in India has this problem that it's whatever the government gave us as their data.
So you can also try mapping that monitoring station data with the groundwater data which is available.
But the two are not that correlated. Surface water and groundwater toxicity is not correlated.
But for benchmarking your numbers for the BOD and COD, the differences or comparison scale, that is one parameter which you can also check.
I'll write that down.
The large industries, and some of the designated sectors of industry, what government did 4 years back, there is online monitoring what you release, BOD, COD, pH, or if you claim you are not, discharging anything, then there's a camera. And there's a real-time reporting of this data with the State Pollution Control Board as well as server of a state. And moment you variation is there more than 20% of the value, it will show in red. So he'll be issued warning. If he doesn't amend it, then the further action for a stoppage of production. But this is for the large industries, both for air as well as water.
So our air work will be more interesting than this. Or, a lot of these econometric issues go away because there's NASA. Well, the US is, withdrawing a lot of its support for these data collection systems. But from 2000 onwards, with NASA data, we can go down to a very granular level, and that covers the whole country. So we're working on that, but apparently studying air is completely different than studying water, right? I've had to read and learn inversions, and it's a completely different ballgame.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Shareen. That
Thank
was
you.
a truly
Thank you.
fascinating session.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.